Situated in Coney Mall is kind of a forgotten gem that was a Kings Island original. That's right, we're talking about the Monster. Hello, everybody. Alongside Don Helbig, I'm Ryan Sir, and this is Tower Topics.
Tower Topics is a podcast by Kings Island fans for Kings Island fans because that's who we are and that's who we care about.
All right, so the Monster, it's funny because of all the discussions with Kings Island, it seems like this one is kind of a forgotten gem. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I agree. It's been there since the park opened in 1972. One of the rides that came over from Coney Island. It's a ride that, guests of all ages, I guess you could say, can ride it pretty much. Fun ride, especially if you're in your teens riding it with your friends.
Yeah, I agree. I think the coolest thing about the Monster is that it still has old incandescent lights on it, and it hasn't gotten like an LED package to it. So
no, it's still old school.
Yeah, so it's still old school, and I'm glad that they preserved that. For those watching the YouTube video, we're showing a video, and it's still got like actual bulbs that need to be changed out. There it is, all lit up. I think
it's an awesome looking night ride, isn't it? Especially that Coney Mall atmosphere.
Yeah,
would not be the same without the Monster.
Yeah, I agree. It's and the cool part is it's like, so the tubs spin around, they're on the Octopus Arms, which has the most inefficient loading system ever because it's so old, but what I've learned, and I'm not very good at this at all, is if you and maybe another person are in there, you can tilt back and forth and you can get that thing spinning like crazy long before the ride ever starts. So from what I've heard, that was the thing that was like the popular thing, along with snapping the Flying Eagles back when the Flying Eagles were that thing at Kings Island, where people would see who could get their tub spinning fast enough, because it's not easy to do. It's not like
there's a skill to it, like there was in snapping the Flying Eagles. There is a skill to it to get it to really spin. The way you shift your weight, your the position of your legs and how you do that. So definitely a skill to be able to get it to really spin.
Yeah, that's yeah, absolutely. So Everly Aircraft Company made it. It's an original Coney Island transport. But Don, here's the thing that we kind of wanted to discuss for this. So the Monster, it's been on the rumors for being on the chopping block for quite a while, like long before Cedar Fair. Every year since I've been involved with the park, and I've been involved since about 2002, the rumor has always been that this year is its last year. And then when they put in Subway, I remember hearing next year that's going to be a seating area for Subway. And it has outlived Subway, by the way. And then I heard that it was saved because its drive chain or something like that broke. And I'm definitely speaking out of term. So if anybody knows exactly the terminology, then leave a comment. But like there's a major component that broke, and that was it. And then simultaneously, Canada's Wonderland decided to remove theirs, so they got the spare part, and therefore our Monster lives on through organ donation.
It's a ride, though, Ryan, that it is a lot of maintenance involved to keep it going. It might not look like it, but there's a lot involved there with that. It is, low capacity, the load time a little bit slow. The number of associates it takes to operate that, if you want to make it as efficient as you can with the load time. So there's a lot involved there where it could be a very easy decision if you're Kings Island to say, let's remove that ride.
Yeah.
That it's something that when you're not, somebody that goes to the park and you have a lot of memories and that with it, it's an easy call to do something like that. Now, I don't know that, that's what they want to do, but it would be an easy decision just because of the cost involved with it and all those other things we just talked about. Now, for me, it wouldn't be Coney Mall without the Monster there. That's what I grew up with. I rode it at Coney Island before it came to Kings Island.
Right.
A lot of memories there riding it with my sister, my brother, my daughter, when she was young. She loved it. So we would ride that multiple times, every visit that we went together. I have 219 rides on it, which doesn't seem like a lot by comparison to what I have on the racer and that. But when you look at, the capacity and things, that's a lot of rides on it over the years. Just a lot of fun with it. And I think it's an important ride. I think, like I said, it says, Coney Mall at night. When you have that, you have the scrambler, you have the racer with the tracer lights.
Hmm.
It really brings that area to life. So I hope it's there for a long time. And if you're going to Kings Island, they always say you vote with your feet.
Right.
So make sure that you're riding rides like the Monster, the Scrambler, the Carousel, Shake, Round, and Roll, because you want those rides to be there for years to come. You don't want, somebody in an office and say Charlotte looking on paper and just saying, oh yeah, we can move that ride out, just because the ridership, isn't as high as it is on other rides. So, uh, vote with your feet when you go to the park. Make sure you ride the Monster. And I think it's really a lot of fun during the Halloween haunt season. And you've got
Hmm.
the fog in the area and just with the lighting and everything else. I think that's the best time to ride the Monster is during haunt.
With the lighting and stuff. But to me, I think what makes the Monster special is what I mentioned before. It's still got the old looking light package. So and the racer kind of does too with the chaser lights. So it's almost like a step back in time. It really kind of embodies what they're trying to go for with Coney Mall, or at least what they were trying to go for originally, in terms of a nostalgic 1930s through 1960s amusement park. And I think that's the best set piece that's available uh, to Kings Island, is having those rides that actually live through that period.
Yeah,
But
it
yeah,
is. A lot of fun.
yeah, not a lot of those out there anymore. It seems like, when it comes down to it, we take a lot of stuff for granted. And they took out Skylab at Kings Island, and that was a problematic ride. And then more and more of those started disappearing, and now it's like it's kind of hard to find them. I'd hate to see that with the Monster. Now, granted, Holiday World and Cedar Point still have them, but how much longer? So
Yeah,
as
and
Don
the
mentioned.
Monster, yeah, it's multi-generational too, because
Mhm.
maybe, like for me, my dad took me on it for the first time at Coney Island. Then I'm riding it with my brother and sisters, and then I'm riding it with my daughter, and eventually, if she has, kids down the road, I could ride it with my grandkids and that. So it's a ride that it's definitely multi generational. Everybody, you might not think about it, when you go to the park. It's not the first ride that you want to do. It's not, top of your list, uh, but there's a lot of memories,
Mhm.
just the smiles and the laughs and the memories. I mean, that ride's right up there in terms of delivering those things in the history of Kings Island, in terms of
Yeah.
those memories that it creates for the guests, because it's it is something that you can't ride that and not be laughing and smiling and just having fun with your family and friends.
The cool part is, though, is like being a relic of the past. And I mentioned it's the most inefficient loading system on Earth, and I take that back. Ferris wheels are the most inefficient loading system on Earth. But so for those who don't know, they have two of the arms that are on the ground, and they load those, and then they like move the ride around, and then it sits on the top, and then they have to load the bottom. And you feel like you're on the top for like
You always,
6
when you're in
months.
line for it, you always wanted to try to be one of the first to load, because you got a little bit more time. Maybe you could call it a little more ride time when would move from each position around before the ride would take off. But you also didn't want to be the last one to get off either after the ride was over. So, but I always, it was always fun in line, to try to count and try to figure out, am I going to get on this next load of this ride?
Oh yeah, and it's impossible to predict because I mean the lowest capacity I think could have is like 12, a bunch of single riders and
Yeah,
stuff, and
yeah,
then
you don't know if people are riding single, double, if there's going to cram three in a seat. You just don't know.
yeah, awesome. Well, as Don mentioned, you I'm not going to preach to you about voting. You do have to vote this November, but when it comes to Kings Island, you vote with your feet. And if you think the Monster is important, if you think it's nostalgic, if you have little kids or you're going to have kids one day and you want to ride it with them and have a ride that survived the whole Coney Island thing and the Kings Island thing and now the Six Flags thing or whatever, give it a ride every time you have the opportunity to do so. So therefore you can, continue to enjoy that with your friends and family, making memories for years to come. So let's move on to the listener question. This is coming from Rides and Reviews. And he said, what do you think Kings Island really needs next to become a legendary park? That's a very interesting question.
Well, first of all, I think that Kings Island has been a legendary park for decades.
Hmm.
It's a park that is, you know, it's got an acknowledged reputation as one of the best in the country, you know, North America. So it is a legendary park. I think sometimes when that question comes up, you know, you've got the coaster enthusiasts that think, oh, it needs an RMC to be on the map. You know, well, it's been on the map since 1972, this park. So an RMC doesn't, I mean, for a very small percentage, you know, it might make a little bit of a difference. But in the overall scheme of things, Kings Island has always been and always will be about, you know, families, you know, going there and just having the best day of the year experience. So I feel that it already is a legendary park. Now, your mileage may differ, Ryan.
I think it's not legendary. I'm kidding. So to be clear, when Kings Island opened in 1972, the understanding was there was very little distinction between Kings Island and Disneyland at the time. This was another Disneyland that happened to be in, you know, Deerfield Township, Ohio. And it garnered like a legendary reputation from there. So that was why I kind of wanted you to answer first, because I don't know how to define a legendary park, because I think that there's a lot of stuff that you could.
Yeah, it's a tough term because everybody looks at it differently, Ryan. I mean, the coaster enthusiasts look at parks one way, the families look at it another way, the ones that are park goers and they go all over the country because that's what they do as a family. And so everybody's going to have a different definition of what that means, you know, what Kings Island is. But I think in terms of just the overall package, you know, like I said, it's got that acknowledged reputation as one of the finest, you know, in the industry. So it's hard to find a park that has that total package that Kings Island has. You might find some parks that have maybe a couple more thrilling roller coasters. Look at Cedar Point, Millennium Force, Steel Vengeance. But that overall package that you're looking for, I think Kings Island doesn't really take a back seat to many parks out there.
Yep, I agree. But to be clear, when we talk about legendary status in terms of heard around the world and stuff, Friday the 13th, 1979, that was the date that Kings Island became legendary. And you know from experience, doing the PR and whatever else you did there are people that still fly to Cincinnati from Europe because they want to ride the Beast. You know?
That ride, now, if you want to say there was a ride that put Kings Island on the map, that was it. It went from a regional, you know, park that, you know, drew from the Midwest to worldwide. It didn't take long for people, like you said, all around the world. You had people coming from China, Japan, Great Britain, Russia, you know, everywhere, specifically to ride the Beast. And this year, celebrating its 45th anniversary, it still plays those same rave reviews to people around the world. Now, there's those that have ridden it, you know, hundreds of times, and you know, they've kind of moved on, and you know, they would love to see an RMC, or you know, there's other types of coasters. You know, they want the Giga coasters, those types of things. But for the majority of the guests that come to Kings Island, you know, the Beast is still king.
Yeah, and what's funny about the Beast is you still, you know, I've ridden, it's always been there. I was born in 83. It opened in 79. So I've never known a world without the Beast. And I always think of it in those terms of like people that were born in like 2006, like they've never known a world without backlot stunt coaster, which is a really skewed way to look at the world. But to me, it's like, even now, having ridden it hundreds of times, I don't count my rides the way you do, but I've ridden it more than an average person will ride in their entire lifetime at this point. And still every once in a while I ride it, especially at night, where I'm like, wow, that's such a good ride. You know,
it's a special roller coaster, and to have it in our backyard here, you know, in the greater Cincinnati area, I mean, it's just amazing that we have this roller coaster here, and it's available anytime. You know, when you and I live, what, 30 miles away or something like that from the park, you know, anytime we want to go, we can go ride the Beast. And then you have others that, you know, they would love to have the Beast at their home park.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. And it's like we end up taking it for granted. And you get a lot of people, the coaster enthusiasts that live in like the Cleveland area, like the Cedar Point hardcores, like for a lot of them, nothing Kings Island would ever top anything at Cedar Point. But for a lot of people that like have no skin in the game, that live in Columbus and can choose between the two, they often choose Kings Island because it's like, yeah, Cedar Point it's cool, but it's crowded and so it just shows that like there's some rubber in there as far as does the biggest mean the most legendary?
Has there ever been a ride, Ryan, that 45 years after it opened is still playing to those same kind of rave reviews? It's still, has that ability to, if you want to use it for PR purposes, to get, stories out there about it. Other rides have anniversaries. They turn 30, 35, 40, 50 years old, 60 years old, but they don't garner the media interest that a ride like the Beast does.
Yeah. It's an easy story. The world's longest wooden coaster. And thank God that the title's still there, because I think it would be at risk to the ride if it wasn't. But
yeah, well, there's a lot of reasons why. I mean, number one, you have to have, it's 35 acres that ride covers.
Yeah.
There's some parks that are barely 35 acres. So you have to have the space, number one. And just the cost to build something of that magnitude today out of wood, it'd be just outrageous to be able to to do. Who's got the money to do that nowadays? So I think it'll hold that record for a long time, and as long as the park continues to take care of it, they breathed new life in it a couple of years ago. The Gravity Group came out and kind of did some track work in certain spots of it. The ride's running fantastic in a lot of ways. I thought when I rode it a couple of years ago and last year, I thought it was running as good as it had since 1991. And I go to 1991 because that's the year that the individual lap bars came into play. You had the seat divider, so it kind of changed the ride experience a little bit there. But since 1991, it's running better than it has, in years. So, I really, I love the Beast. I'm glad that it's, it's at Kings Island. When you think about Kings Island, you think of the Eiffel Tower, you think of the Beast. Those are the first two things, and then Blue Ice Cream.
Then Blue Ice Cream, of course. Yeah, I've always made the joke that the reason why the Beast record's never been broken is that there's never been a park out there stupid enough to break that record. Because something that made a lot of sense in 1979 would probably not make a lot of sense.
Yeah, but I've been at airports. I'm out in like Los Angeles, and I have a shirt. Maybe it said Kings Island on the shirt, and they come up and they just said Kings Island, the Beast, love it. And so it was always kind of exciting for me that was recognized. No matter where I've gone, everyone's heard of the Beast.
Absolutely. So, yeah. So as far as what to add for Kings Island being legendary, because we've totally danced around this actual question.
And we do that a lot.
Well, Kings Island, I think, goes through like sine wave phases where there's ups and downs. And, we talked a lot in a previous episode about how 2022 and probably 2008 were, in my opinion, two of the finest seasons. It was Kings Island firing on all cylinders, and there were times in between where, during the 90s and maybe some would argue during the Paramount years where it was just like, what are they thinking? So no, Kings Island has never been the sharpest knife in the drawer every year, but the standard for the dullest knife in the drawer is pretty darn sharp. So my analogy made no sense whatsoever, but I hope you guys understand it. All right. Hey, I'm Ryan Sir along with Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.